and our events are designed to raise awareness of how the brain works. My name is Gabriela Benko. I'm co-hosting this event with my colleague Deirdre Morrison today. Over to you, Deirdre.
Thanks, Gabriela. So we are going to introduce a concept here today that we call the brain optimization buffet. And there are many, many models out there to help us to understand how to support our brains, and they give us details of the things that our brains need in order to function well. So the models tend to focus on things that we can do to promote physical and mental well-being in order to support our brain, and what we can do to support our brain's neuroplasticity. That's the way it learns and changes by making new neural connections. And in turn, our neuroplasticity supports us in making the changes and building the new habits that help us to sustainably enhance our well-being. So today we're proposing a slightly different model. And this one is less about sticking to a small set of things that we must include, like little checkboxes, because we recognize that life has a habit of getting in the way of our best intentions to support our brains. We're also very well aware that having a checklist of factors that you need to tick off every day in order to feel like you're doing the thing right is just really one more way to actually make us feel like we're not doing it right at all, like we're not getting anything right. So we would like to welcome you to this idea of the brain optimization buffet. And this model operates on the basis, if I can move the slides forward, on the basis that there's a lot going on in our lives, and we also we have a range of options. We're not always aware of all of them. And recognizing what is available to us then gives us new choices. However, we're aware that when we're aware of more options and more options within those options, our ability to adapt and roll with the punches increases. And that gives us a much better chance of maintaining our well-being and our best brain function. So this model is designed to help you enhance that brain function and well-being while helping you to create a recipe that's flexible and adaptable when that's what life requires. We're going to introduce you briefly to each of the elements in this buffet first, and then we're going to take you through some exercises that will help you to identify some of the patterns in your life currently and open up some options to experiment with new recipes, or when life demands it, to have some backup plans so that you don't fall into the trap of getting burned out. And there's one more thing I would like to say before I hand back over to Gabriela, and that is that this is an n=1 kind of situation. n=1 is a sort of a statistics thing or a research thing. N is the number of subjects in the piece of research, and it's 1 because you are this entire piece of research. This experiment is all based on you and what you have got going on in your life. We're not trying to roll out a one-size-fits-all here. This is very much about looking at ourselves and what we have available to us and making the best of that. So, all yours, Gabriela. Would you like me to stop sharing so you can pick it up, or do you want me just to move on slides and you can tell me when to?
Yeah, if you could move on the slides,
okay.
That would be fantastic. And I think you are not sharing.
Oh, actually, yeah, there was one more. I think I was going to take these as well. The elements that are affecting the equation. So this is something that we actually do.
You're not sharing, Deirdre.
Am I not?
No, not now, as far as I can see.
It says that I am. Can anybody else see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Yeah, you can. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right. There are lots of elements affecting this equation, this n=1 equation, and we're going to look at some of those in this exercise. We're going to break that down into 3 main categories. We've got the body, the brain, and what's beyond those 2. And that is really where we hand back to you, I think, Gabriella. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. So first, we're going to focus on the 5 elements of the body, and the first being sleep. And we spend roughly 1/3 of our lives sleeping. So everybody knows the detrimental impact of sleep deprivation. We can't think, we have bad mood, bad emotional regulation. And long-term, there is a negative impact on health and the immune system. And when we sleep, a lot of things are going on. The brain is in maintenance mode. It gets rid of the unnecessary. And secondly, it also practices newly learned information, and it consolidates memories, as well as through dreaming, it helps with emotional processing. So during a normal and healthy sleep, we see generally 4-6 cycles per night, sleeping cycles per night, which combine various sleep states. There are 4 sleep states, and an average sleep cycle lasts about 90 minutes. So this takes us about to 6 to 9 hours sleep. And as I said before, there is a lot of household tasks going on. So cleaning, so removing the buildup of waste from brain functions. And this is performed by the cells in our brains, which are called astrocytes. And sleep is also closely associated with the consolidation of learning and memory, and particularly things that we have learned in the past couple of days. And as I mentioned before, dreaming is really, really important and can help us with our emotional processing. Now, the second element is rest, and rest is very different from sleep. Rest is also referred to as downtime or non-time, and many times we can misinterpret what it means. So true downtime means no goal and no focused attention. And there is nutritious rest, and there are empty calories as much as in nutrition. And I will also touch on the productivity addiction that some of us might have. I particularly had this problem and maybe have this problem. So just to go back to the empty calories. So watching a show on Netflix isn't really downtime, because your brain processes information. Scrolling through social media is not downtime, as these are really attention-hungry monsters. So that's why we talk about the attention economy. So if you are a productivity addict, then it can be quite difficult to understand or to get into the way of appreciating rest. So we always feel like we must do something, we have to be productive, or I don't want to be lazy. So what we need to understand, that rest is part of peak performance. It's like for top athletes. And this notion really helped me to incorporate more rest in my life. So think about it. When did you have your best ideas? Generally, most of the people say they don't have their best ideas in the office, for example, but they have it when they are having a shower or they are driving. So what happens is when you have nutritious rest, basically you activate the positive aspects, the helpful aspects of the default mode network. So this is when you tap into your imagination, your creativity. And what we need to somehow find out, an activity that keeps our attention enough, but it's not really taxing. So this will keep us in the present, so we don't worry about the future or regret things or being sad about the past. So what we need to cultivate is really how to become self-aware when we need rest, and then find the right ways for us to do it. So because, and this is the important thing, the rest is doing something. Because these mental breaks increase your productivity and replenish your attention as well. It helps you to solidify memories and learning. So it encourages creativity. How can you do it? Maybe you want to engage in crochet, knitting, crafts, go for a walk, or listen to music. So the next one is about nutrition. That is very important. I'm not going into the details about what we need to eat, but why is it important? So our brain is about 2% of our total body weight, but it uses 20% of your energy each day. So we really need to ensure that there is enough energy and, of course, adequate minerals for our brain function to help us with our effectiveness and avoid energy crashes and any resource shortages. So one thing that can happen to a lot of us when we are overly busy then and we rush around and we are pressured, then we might find tempting to skip the meals. So this is a pretty bad decision, not just in the moment, but also our energy hungry brain cannot function after this very well. So it will perform poorly. We make bad decisions after that, poor decisions, and our mood becomes really tatchy. So this is when it's almost like when you decide to McDonald's instead of having a really good balanced meat. Now, also you can think about this as an expensive car, because your brain functions best when it gets the premium fuel. So high quality food contains a lot of vitamins, mineral, antioxidants. So on the other hand, if it gets it, it's great. This is premium fuel. It works very well. If it doesn't get the premium fuel, but something that is not good for the car, then this will ruin a little bit the brain, or it will not function well. So what do you need to do during the day maybe is to plan when you are on the road, you plan the fuel stops, because you cannot get to the end of the highway just to put the fuel in. Now, hydration is the next element, because the brain is waterier than the rest of us. About 78–90% of the brain is water. Now, in many ways, you can consider your brain, your head, like a canary in the coal mine, because this is your alert system. So what do I mean by that is that the first thing that happens when you start to get dehydrated, maybe you start to get irritated, you cannot focus, or for some, there is a headache coming on. So the first thing that when this happens to you, maybe the best thing is just to grab a glass of water and see if you can avoid taking the paracetamol. So many times, a lot of people, because they are extremely busy, we can forget to drink. So of course, this is not just important for our brain, but for our joints, for our digestion, for many, many things, for the whole body. But for the brain, it's extremely important. So maybe you want to carry a water bottle with you, and also think about water breaks. And we can plan for those to maintain our hydration at high level, at the optimal level. And the final one in this body pillar is movement. And I'm not talking about exercise, not just going to the gym. So we need to think a little bit outside the box for a moment, because we can think that we need to get to do exercise and it takes a big chunk of our time. We have to go somewhere special to do it. And then many times we are less likely to do it at all. Now, we need to integrate movement in our day, and because movement raises our heart rate and increases our blood flow to our brain, and it brings a lot of oxygen to our brain. Also, most of us have a seated lifestyle. We sit at the desk, we drive, we are on Zoom calls. And the fact is that we many times compress our lungs. So our lungs cannot work at their full capacity. So we cannot get enough oxygen or the optimal oxygen into our brain. So when we move, then with this, the circulation will get more oxygen to our brain. So it's, if you just stand up and you walk some steps, that's already really good for your brain and for your body. So when you have this seated lifestyle, or if you have it, and your lungs cannot work to their full capacity, the question for you will be, how can you help your body to get the optimal level? And integrate movement into your day. Do not compartmentalize. You can walk when you are calling someone. You can stretch, you can stand up, you can take the stairs or play the kids or fight with pillows, do some housework or gardening. Anything that will speeds up your circulation will enhance your brain.
Thanks, Gabriella. We're doing a really quick kind of whistle-stop tour here of these things. So we're going to move into the second group now, and that is the things that are more related to the brain itself. Although you'll see in all of these, there is overlap. Now, the first one is personal relevance. Personal relevance is really, why do I want to do this? Why do I want to do it? Many of us will have heard people like Simon Sinek talking about why and why it's important. Now, for these things, it doesn't need to be a lifelong overarching why, but when we're motivated by something, then it's easier to do it, to stick to it. And sometimes we need to shift our thinking in order to find a why for something that will enhance our well-being. We can actually think of this in terms of the way some kids just seem to be really motivated to get good grades because they already know what those grades will make possible. And then others find it really hard to give their schoolwork attention because they don't see its relevance either to their present or their future. So the real question is, how can we make things that are beneficial to us more personally relevant? And we can take that movement example that Gabriella was talking about a minute ago. And, we might not personally like the idea of exercise very much, but we might love dancing, for instance, and not even really think of that in the same way as we think of exercise. But of course, it does have all those benefits. Or we might appreciate that a walk gives us time to process our thinking, or even catch up with a friend. And this is what they call habit stacking. And it's an example of finding the personal relevance in things, of making them relevant to us. So we can then look at the idea of repetition and focus. In order to achieve a level of competence at something, we need to practice. And that is, we need to repeat it a number of times to give our brain that time to build up those neural networks and the myelin that goes with those connections that speeds it up and makes it more fluid. So we need to allow ourselves the space and grace to do this. And I'm going to use this phrase, like you're going to be sick of this phrase by the end of this. We also have to have the trust in our neuroplasticity that it will, with that focused practice and repetition, be able to get us there, be able to help us do the things that we want to do. Sometimes when we start, it might seem like this is an insurmountable thing, but when we do give ourselves that time, very, very interesting things happen. One of the mistakes I see a lot is that people assume that they should be able to do things quickly. They should be able to learn something quickly. And what they do is they see that other people can do this thing and wonder why they can't do it as easily. But in my experience, if we're seeing other people as an inspiration and not a way to create unrealistic expectations on ourselves, then we can give ourselves that grace and space to learn in our own way and our own time. We can do it, but we need to understand that we're seeing someone else's end result and trying to match that without having had that grace and space to do so. And that can be very detrimental to our well-being and our self-esteem. So we move on then to making mistakes. And again, I really feel this is a very underestimated ingredient in this brain optimization buffet, because making mistakes is part of the learning process that we can actually really learn to love if the conditions are right. And many of us will have heard the term psychological safety, and that is where the conditions are right, where we feel that we can make mistakes without feeling as though we'll be punished or put down for it. Making mistakes can also result in surprising and unexpected results, and there are many instances of this being the basis of multi-million-dollar inventions. One example that springs to mind is the adhesive that's now used on Post-it notes. It was too weak for anything else, but that didn't stop it being part of one of the biggest brands on the planet. Making mistakes actually can also create a little bit of levity in a situation, as long as we're willing to recognize that it happens to us all. Again, grace and space. The next point the next ingredient in our buffet is awareness and reflection. And awareness and reflection are actually a range of tools, and there are a lot of subtle flavors at play within them. So we can be aware of these options for well-being, for example, and aware of how our personal recipe looks and needs to look for us to be our most effective. There's also awareness of things that are going on around us, our environment, the people we interact with, the beliefs and stories that are pervasive in our culture, and of course, awareness of our brains and the things that go on with them. And reflection then, that is something that honestly always sounded a little bit passive or self-indulgent to me, but in reality, reflection or review, if you prefer a word like that, is somewhere we can actively and with practice objectively assess and observe the things that we want to change and decide what steps we need to take to change them. When we don't give ourselves the time to do this, again, with the grace and the space, then we're not really allowing our brain to learn from, to process, and to move on from or improve our effectiveness. And finally, in this category, we've got play. And this is my favorite one of all. It's the most natural way to learn, as far as I can see, because we can be curious and open-ended, and we can experiment. And when we play, we're not fixed on an outcome. We're open to possibility. In play, we can learn and also try things out in a safe environment and also get some of that practice. Because we're not trying to control the outcome, we're less hard on ourselves. We know that this is our sandbox, this is the safe environment. And this is why play is so vital for kids as well. And you know how quickly they learn. They learn almost everything through play. So yeah. Again, we're really running through these because we want to get to the exercise stage. So I'll hand back to Gabriella for the final group. And there's one thing I will say, though, although we've broken this into almost 3 courses, you can't just skip dessert, or you can't skip the starter. You need to take from all of these these sections on the buffet at various points.
So the third pillar is really beyond, and connections is the first one, and relationships. We are deeply social, and after COVID, I think I don't even have to say almost anything about this category. We all experience it. It's a common experience. So the connections and relationships we form and foster are incredibly important to our well-being and how we learn. So if you think about the learning bit, and this is about neuroplasticity, just think about school. Was there a teacher who really influenced you? And what was your connection with them? And how did that impact your desire to learn what they were teaching? Now, in terms of our personal relationships and our general support network, how safe, loved, and appreciated we feel, it impacts our well-being profoundly. And we need circles of relationships, close and loose, so we cannot always have deep relationships. It also matters how we talk to the butcher when we go in there and buy some meat. If you think about COVID, I live in France, and here what we did, we connected with our neighbors because we couldn't meet our friends. And also, we connected our friends using Zoom because we were so hungry for these relationships. Also, co-working is about moral support. Sometimes people who work from home, they get on Zoom and they work together, maybe in silence, and then they have a chat. So this connecting with people and connecting with people will bring you in the moment. And this is the most important thing, that it's a mutual interaction, and it will take us to create a better world. Now, novelty is the second one, which is about, it's a neutral term, even though we try to think about it as a positive term. It means that something that we are not familiar with. Our right hemisphere really enjoys novelty, and we are primed to look for novelty. And this is one thing that our brain does really well, that it notices something that is new in the environment. So as I said, it's a neutral term. So we are not familiar with something that's novelty. And then our brain assesses whether it's an opportunity or threat. It's a learning tool for the brain. And if it's an opportunity, we also get a little dose of dopamine, and this motivates us. This will gives us a lot of energy. And if you think about when you found some new ideas, when you received a gift, or when you travel to new places, this is the feeling, this novelty feeling when it's positive. It really shakes us up, and it shifts our perspective, and it creates new thinking, and we can see things differently. Now, if there is no novelty, we get bored and we get demotivated. So this can be, the rut of the day, and then we feel the routine is dominant in our life, and it can be very demotivating. Also, in the world that we live in, the VUCA world, we have too much stimulation that can become stressful. And humor, the last one, which I love a lot. I learned to love it because it is about novelty. It's also about bonding and connecting with other people. And also it's something that gives you a new perspective. It can help you with sticky learning. And you can sometimes just enjoy yourself, and just for the sake of it. And our brain, this is an interesting element, because this is the only place where our brain appreciates uncertainty. Normally, our brain gets into a threat response when things are uncertain. But here we really want it. It feasts on it. But of course, it has to happen in a safe environment. And to speak about the short-term effects, when we have a good laugh, it stimulates our organs. There is a lot of intake of oxygen. It also relieves your stress response, relieve your stress response. So you get relaxed, and it soothes tension. It stimulates circulation. So if on a long term, it improves your mood, it can also improve your immune system. So laughter is the best medicine in our lives.
Super. Thanks so much, Gabriella. So what I would like to move on to now is a thought experiment. Now, I'm not sure if everybody has got the handout that we created and emailed out to you. If not, Gabriella, I wonder, would you mind putting the link for that from the Gmail or from the G Drive into the chat, and people can open it up if they wish, if they don't have it printed off already. So as we get into this experiment, this is the first question. Having had a look at all of those things and imagining them laid out as a buffet, first of all, which are the ones that I regularly have on my plate of things that I use to support my well-being and to support my brain function? For some people, they already get a lot of movement. They may have very good sleep, or they may be paying a lot of attention to their nutrition. And these are kind of some of the core ones. But other things that are on that buffet, what ones are we taking regularly? What are the things that we don't take from the buffet? What are the things that we haven't been considering as options to support our well-being and to support our brain function? Now, I think when you get hold of the handout, we have got a very nice sheet that looks like this, actually. This is one I prepared earlier. And on that, we have got all of the things that we've just covered off here. And we've got a scale of 1 to 7. So you can use this to work out what things you're getting a lot of, what things you're not getting so much of, what things you haven't really been considering. You can use that as a little sliding scale to see what you've got there.
I'm getting there. I'm very sorry.
That's okay. Take your time. Take your time. Now, here's the next question then that we need to consider of all of these things on this this wonderful buffet. Am I over-reliant on some of them? Are there some that I find are central to my well-being, to my own personal maintenance, and that if these slip, if there's an opportunity, so for instance, if I'm a real gym bunny and I break my leg, what's going to happen to my well-being in the time when I'm forced to stop doing that? So this is, we have so many life events that interrupt our normal kind of ways of doing things. And what backup plans do we have? What alternatives and what options have we got in our back pocket for when we need them?
You can find in the chat PDF. You can download it from there.
Yeah, so even if you can just open that, which will make it a lot easier to have a look at this as we're going through it. So as I said, we have on this sheet, on a scale of 1 to 7, all of these different things. And then the question is going to be, with the recipe that I currently use, when we've had time to tick all those little boxes and make, assess where we are on each of the elements, on each of the ingredients, where is my well-being now? If I were to rate it on a scale of 1 to 7, how is it with the recipe that I'm currently using? And then what would happen if I changed or added to my current recipe? So I think we can take a few minutes to think about these things and see if we can get some thoughts and insights from anyone who wants to pop them in the chat, or if you've got any questions about, if you want any clarification on any of these things, go for it, and we'll see what we can do. We'll just I'll just go quiet for a little while so people can think. So just to look at this again, I wonder if anyone would be prepared to share in the chat one thing that they currently haven't been taking from the buffet, or one thing that they have been not taking enough of from the buffet. I see Ivona has mentioned that she's doing a lot for her brain and not so much, sorry, a lot for her body, but not necessarily so much from the brain aspect of things. So it's great that you've got that already support tools and that range and selection from the buffet, Ivona. And I wonder, is there any, what would happen? Have you had any thoughts on what would happen if you changed the recipe or changed the selection that you're currently taking? Making mistakes is a difficult one. It sure is. And thank you for saying that, Ivona. You know, we've all been, my personal opinion is that we have, an awful lot of us anyway, have been very, very carefully trained not to make mistakes. We have spent a lot of time being encouraged to get the right answer in our schooling and so on. So this is something that we have learned, and our neuroplasticity has learned this for us over the years. And, you know, that this is something that we do need to, again, give ourselves that space and grace to look at. Shelley, not enough sleep. This is one that so many people are, I think, they do have trouble with sleep. Good sleep hygiene, as Gabriella said, is so important. So important for us. But, you know, there are times when when that's just not a possibility. So what else can we do? What else can we take from that buffet to support us in other ways? Our nutrition and our hydration and so on can actually help just to tide us over until we can get to a stage where we can get the sleep and the rest that we need. Jisoo, more movement, making mistakes play to the current recipe. That's wonderful. Gabriella, have you any thoughts and what's coming up here in the chat for you?
Yeah, I think it really resonated with me what Ivona wrote, the making mistakes, and I think it's for many of us that's a problem. As you said, we are kind of conditioned not to go to that direction. Mm-hmm. And also because of the seated, because it comes up many times, the movement that could increase. And this is I'm really what I want to say about movement is this is how we look at movement as well, because it's not about sport, but it's about moving our body and integrating movement as much as we can into our lives, and also acknowledging that we have done that. And there is one very good tool is walk. We are born to walk, and if you go for 5-10 minutes walk, it's good not just for your health, but it's also very good for your cognitive performance. So it also can be part of the downtime if you just walk for the joy of walk itself. This notion in a productive world is something that I think we need to appreciate more when we speak about movement and about downtime in our world, because we always have to perform. And in order to perform, I think if you change the perspective and you understand that for performance, you need rest. I mean, think about the marathon runners. They cannot train every day running a marathon for the competition. They need to think about rest. And it's the same thing for us. If we want peak performance, we need to think about how we can have a rest for our brains.
Yeah, and they also, you know, they talk a lot of, as well in athletics about recovery time and recovery days, where we do, that is, there is rest taken on those days from the things that we normally expect of our bodies and our brains.
There is Nika who wrote that it's difficult to have or to make relationship because of social anxiety. Do you have something to say about that, Deirdre?
Thanks, Gabriella. Yeah, Nika, this is a really interesting one. Actually, Gabriella and I were talking earlier about one of my social kind of outlets is my kendo club, and we tend to have quite a high proportion of fairly introverted people in kendo for some reason. And during COVID, of course, when we couldn't train, that was one of the things that was you know, our social outlet in that context was immediately stopped. So we did have a few things that we did together, you know, because we have common interests outside of kendo as well. We did get online, and we actually played Dungeons and Dragons for 2 years straight. But the other thing that we would do quite often, and I think Gabriella mentioned something similar to this earlier, is the idea of co-working, where we just we would get online and just sit in each other's company, but not necessarily talking or saying anything to each other. The other thing that occurs to me as well is that, you know, sometimes sometimes relationships are not always with other humans. You know, we have great and meaningful connections with our pets and so on as well. I think when we have common interests, that does tend to help though as well. And I hope that's helpful, Nika. It's hard to say really without knowing the situation a little bit better, but I do hope that that helps. And, you know, when we have some of these other things, when we have creative outlets and when we have play, even in, you know, for our own sake, and play doesn't have to be connected to other people. Play can be a great outlet as well, for our brains and our imaginations. So, and then we've got, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Do you know, Gabriella? Sula?
I would say CO, but I'm not sure.
Well, maybe you can guide us, person with the lovely name that we haven't come across before. And if you'd like to come off mic and tell us, we'd be delighted. Movement could increase, play perhaps too. I do a lot in terms of connection. See, this is the thing that I love about this, is that we all do have our areas where we tend to lean into this one or lean into that one. And, you know, in terms of that connection, was there something, and you'll have to forgive me if I'm saying this wrong, Sula, that you were able to draw on when we had that that time in lockdown when we weren't able to have those connections, what was it that you were able to draw on to enhance the well-being and the brain function without that? So again, lots of food for thought here, even just in a very small kind of run through with this. But what I'd like to do now is just to ask you these 3 questions. What is, if anything, of what we've talked about today, have you found surprising? What have you found useful? And I'm hoping you've got the sheet and that will be useful to you as you go forward and continue your experiments, and start noticing these various things, what you use, what you don't use, what you might be able to draw on. And what is it that you're still curious about? I would love if you could share with us some thoughts on that in the comments. It would really help us as well to understand what's actually of benefit to people in these sessions. Would you like to add anything to that, Gabriella?
Not for now. I think just let's focus on that. I will add something maybe at the end of the...
So maybe even if you could put the questions in the chat, it might help actually. And then we'll stop the screen share shortly and see if we can get some proper conversation going.
Okay, I have put it in. I have put
Thank you
them
so
in.
much. Okay, well then I will stop share if those are in the chat now, and
Yeah,
that will mean that yes, we can see people again. The connection comes back. Was there anything that that surprised you, Gabriella, when you first kind of discovered all this stuff? Is there anything that you could share with us?
there are a lot of things, but what really stayed with me, and I think this is very important, because that this model is not something that we use to judge ourselves and to say that, oh gosh, I'm not doing it well. And again, so it's not about judgment. It's not about flogging ourselves, but it's just understanding that this is how we can optimize our brain. And I'm telling myself as well as I'm telling you now. And yes, there are periods in our life when we cannot get enough sleep. Yes, there are periods in our life when we cannot get enough rest or we cannot connect. And what we just need to know is that everybody has a different mix and an optimal mix. And we just need to ask ourselves, what is our optimal one? And how can we have the best mix at the moment now? And maybe, how to help my future self, and not to judge, what I'm not doing, but it's about helping my future self, that I'm thinking about these things. And this gave me a relief, so it doesn't mean that, I'm not doing it well. But it's more about, okay, so this is how I can do it. And I can see here, I need to tweak it. And I will try just one step at a time. So this was really what, for me, was the most important thing.
Yeah, and I think even if we go back to the idea of making mistakes, we will make mistakes sometimes. We will forget to drink the water. We will overdo it at the gym. We will, we'll lose track of some of our connections. And we can correct these. We can notice and reflect, be aware of what's happened and what changes have happened, how they've affected us and our actions, reactions, and interactions, and then adjust and learn from that and move on again.
Yeah. So if you have, I don't know if you, because I haven't seen any comments, what has surprised you, what has been useful, or what are you still curious about? If you try to type something in the chat, maybe you haven't sent it. If you haven't done it, maybe you can come on if you are happy to share. You can unmute yourself and...
I'm just wondering...
Yeah, Flora.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
What does fear do to your brain?
Fear is a natural response, and it's something that is very sensible to have at certain points in time. However, one of the things that happens is that our brains don't always use fear appropriately. And if we have ongoing fear, too much fear, the neurochemicals that it dumps into our brain, those kind of the stress responses that would encourage us to get out of there or to freeze up entirely, they are not really going to enhance our performance, our ability to be at our most effective. So if, for instance, we're coming into something and we're experiencing fear, then we are preparing ourselves for a bad outcome, for something to go wrong, for something to, we're not expecting the best to happen. We're worried about something that's going to happen. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Gabriella?
Yes, it's when we are afraid. So, when a dog is charging against you, barking, then of course it's normal to get afraid, and it's a very good response, because the blood is pumped into your limbs and you can run faster. But many times when we are in social connections, we experience the same bodily reaction. We can't think, all the blood goes into our limbs. And then we get into survival mode, and that's not a creative mode. So when we are in this, we are protecting ourselves against a threat that we might perceive is a state when we cannot collaborate, we cannot create. So that's the problem with the fear. Sometimes it's useful, rarely, and most of the times it can hinder our performance.
Yes, I'm just thinking of a time when I had a fall that I wasn't expecting, and how I was a completely different person during that fall. Everything kind of changed. Everything went. I was almost in a different planet. It was so different than what I had been a few seconds before that.
Yes, but I think there were other factors kicking in there. This is my mom, everyone, by the way, so I know the situation that she's talking about. So I'm not just hypothesizing on this one, but you broke your wrist, Mom. You went into shock. So yes, that's a little bit different than just fear. And I think one of the things that I would add to, well, two things that I'll add to that. First of all, we're going to be doing a session on unpleasant feelings on Thursday, where we'll probably cover things that are more related to the kind of standard fears and unpleasantness that we would think about being afraid. And also, if you have, like Gabriella was saying, if you feel you need to run, then you probably don't need to work out whether or not you need to sit through this fear, just run. But if you have time to think about, hang on, should I be afraid in this situation? Should I be having this response? Then there are actually ways of getting through that and managing that response and learning new ways of dealing with it. But if it's the rabid dog, just get out of there. Don't worry about whether you need to be feeling it or not.
Thank you.
Does anyone else want to come on and ask a question or raise a point? We've got a few minutes left.
I think, Deirdre, just looking at the chat, I can see that making mistake was interesting for Nika, for Jisoo, and that it's important for the brain. And then Nika said that I'm always forced to not to make a mistake. It's not just you. I think it resonates.
Would that be a perfectionist kind of feeling, Nika? A lot of us, again, we have that. It's this all or nothing thinking, and this is what Dr. Joan Rosenberg would call bad emotional math, and we'll look a little bit at that on Thursday as well. Sorry, my light is coming and going here. It's very changeable. So maybe we could just
Just a question here, if you don't mind, the stable environment. So what is better for the brain, stable or challenging environment? That's a good question.
It is a great question, isn't it? Maybe, does it have to be this or that? Maybe we can have a stable environment and be challenged. And, challenge is great if we want to change and grow and adapt, then we need a little bit of challenge, don't we? Otherwise, we're just staying the same. We're not growing and learning. The ability to do those things safely and to feel, again, like we can make the mistakes, like we can take those creative risks and so on, and having the stability to do that, that's also obviously very, very helpful. Thank you, Jisoo. So can I move to the final slide? And would you mind wrapping us up, Gabriella? Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining us today. And before you sign off, I would like to draw your attention to our next session, which is today at 7 p.m. GMT. Great Britain time, or CET 8 p.m. It's a 1.5 hour session. Just could you remind me of the title, the exact title, Deirdre?
Yes, we are going to be looking at helpful models for understanding emotion.
Yeah, exactly. So if you enjoyed and find useful today's event, please tell other people who could benefit from these events to become a member of the Neurodevelopment Institute, and they can participate in our events. They will get emails. So they will also get access to our resources and recordings. So now we are officially say farewell, goodbye to you. So thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you in the coming days, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, or later.
Thank you, everyone. It was wonderful to have you with us, and thank you so much for your questions, your comments, and your participation. Really appreciate it.